Hey guys, it's Steven. Got a Bytes Chart update for you here. It's been a couple weeks since my last video. We left off on the 10th, and since then we've had a nice rally in the Bytes token and the overall markets. Ethereum hitting a high of 1660. So very bullish, and we started to see NFTs kind of get some more volume and definitely some action within Neo Tokyo as well. So, some nice events coming up here for Neo Tokyo with the Bytes 2.0. Definitely some cool mints going on within the Neo Tokyo community. So a lot of hype, and it's definitely been reflected in the token price. Where there's just net buying versus net selling, right? So just looking at the charts, I went ahead and created the monthly pivot chart. So if you're not familiar with pivots, it's very simple. You can use a calculator by taking the high, the low, and the close, and it just gives you some mathematical targets to use to trade the prices of really any asset. So, um, looking at the monthly pivot chart, we had this central pivot, and obviously anything there would be considered, I guess they call it like a value zone. Um, it's also considered a magnet as well, where the price tends to gravitate towards the central pivot. But as we move higher, we have a resistance one, a resistance two, and then the highest resistance is a resistance three, and anything above it, the third resistance is considered, I guess you just call it exponential. And looking at the US dollar chart here, this first resistance, it definitely, there was some resistance, right? We had some selling a few times here, but what you want to see with charts, and like any charts, you want to see resistance become support, and that's basically what we saw here, right? Where we moved above it a few times. This resistance was eventually accumulated, came back down and tested as support, and that gave it basically the go ahead to move higher. So that's just the way I look at the chart. Anything can happen. A new tweet, some new macro news for Bytes, anything can move the price of Bytes. But what I like to look at is just the risk, and as we move higher towards these different resistances, there's more risk in the price, right? So uh, keeping an eye on that. If we look at the previously the weekly um, pivot chart, we had this central pivot at 280, and as we moved up, you can see as we moved towards resistance, we almost hit the R3 here. So there is a monthly R3, a couple of dollars higher, but can't really chart that. So looking on to this week, we'll see if we can move towards this central pivot at about 389. That would be cool. Um, but for me, I'm just more focused on the Bytes to Ethereum chart. If you're not gaining against Ethereum, then what's the point? That's the whole purpose, is to beat ETH's performance, right? And if not, why not just buy ETH? So looking at that chart, uh, for the month, a pretty clean chart for the month of July. So, if you accumulated below, like we have been over the past month here, these are basically just all accumulation zones and liquidity pool zones. And anything below there would have been really, really good. And as we talked about in last video, going into Bytes 2.0, it was the time to start accumulating, right? And looking at where the resistance is going to be. So looking at the weekly chart from when we left off, uh, I wasn't really able to show these higher ranges before, but just to show like where it would have been, you got you get this central pivot at 18, and as we moved higher, 23, 28, and there would have been another one up here as well. But looking at the monthly pivots, uh, really interesting how we've already made it to the monthly R3 at this 310031 area. So me personally, this is the top of my range here. I'm not going to be accumulating. I've actually distributed most of my Bytes tokens at the moment, and I'm going to just wait, honestly, and just kind of let this all play out, because for me, I did what I wanted to do, which was accumulate and distribute. And then going forward, I'm going to use pivots to accumulate again. And I'll just continue that cycle. For me, I don't really need that extra upside. If there is, there still is plenty of upside here. But I'm just going to keep continuing to play these charts here. And looking at, what could possibly happen. This second resistance here could become support. It seems to be lining up with the weekly pivot target here. So just going to keep an eye on that. And yeah, we'll see how that plays out. And looking at the support one for the week at 0.0017, that seems super low. But really, if you look at the liquidity pool, it's maybe 12 to 14. I counted. How much Ethereum would it take to get us to that 0.0017 price, which is right here? It's only about 5,000, maybe 5,500 bytes, right? So, how much net selling would it take to move us lower? You have to look at the liquidity pool to see how much selling it could handle, right? If we're still distributing over 7,500 bytes a day, for 5,500 bytes to be sold, it's not like a crazy thing, right? So that's a possibility, and that's what I'm watching here, and that's what you need to watch if you are invested in Bytes. So some really good news from the previous video. Uh, the amount of holders are up, almost 300 here at about 250 or so. Really nice to see that we're getting a higher, maybe one of the highest holders we've seen in a very long time. So good to see the holders moving up. And as you can see, like I talked about, a lot of supply coming in over the last 2 weeks here. So if I were to 1,536 minus 1,235, so yeah, 300,000. And what was that in 16 days? Yeah, so about 18,000 a day coming into existence recently. So um, yeah, that's a lot, right? So this is the reason why Bytes 2.0 is coming out. We want to make it so that there aren't this many Bytes tokens being coming into circulation. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that, this total supply. And obviously the market cap is important. As we talked about before, buying, my goal was to buy below $1 million market cap for the Bytes token, right? And I think we got to a point of like $800,000 market cap was the low, I think, for Bytes recently. So from that to this, pretty nice to see that move there. So let's just finish off with the overall macro markets. And we left off on the 10th, and I was pretty bearish. I was ready to go ahead, and this was on the 10th here. I was ready to come back and test this 19.8 again, and we did that. And then I started to see some nice things set up in the overall market. So I tweeted that out that there is a nice base forming here where you had these lower lows and a nice base forming, and it ended up being very nice where you had a nice breakout in Bitcoin, but also Ethereum had a huge breakout, right? And also, if you look at the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart here, uh, starting to see this kind of wane here. So this is telling me we are probably going to keep moving lower now, now that we're kind of making another lower low on this ratio. So am going to be watching for that, but the key support is going to be this $19,800 level. So technically, if we're looking at the S&P 500, we're technically still in a bull market. We're less than 20% off the all-time high, right? 20% off is right here, right where I drew this line here. So technically we're still in a bull market, but it doesn't take much to move us back below, right? So we're still in a very cautious thing here. Looking at the bond market, we have found this nice support here. Maybe we come back down with these rate hikes that's going to be coming here. And importantly too, I'm going to be looking at the dollar indexed, looking at the yearly pivots for the DXY. We're all the way at the R3, right? So R3 is the highest resistance for the year, and anything above that's basically exponential. So we've had a huge move in the dollar index, and this is the comparative strength, right? We're comparing the dollar versus other other weak currencies. So, but what's going to happen here? We did find support on the resistance, so maybe we can continue to move higher, and this will be the catalyst for the next bull market. Is this dollar coming lower? That is a good thesis, right? As the dollar gets weaker, assets can start to go back up. So I'm going to be watching that, but um, for now, just going to play it safe. I don't necessarily want to short this right now, but it's a very high likelihood that we do come back and test these lows here. So going to be ready for that. So I'm going to finish the video here. If you have any questions, let me know and I'll catch you later.